Welcome to the Regenerative Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
Before we dive into our episode today, I got to give a big shout out to our first ever sponsor, Third Street. You might have noticed that the audio quality has significantly improved in this episode and the last one, and that is definitely due to our good friends at Third Street. With their sponsorship, we were able to go out and get ourselves some very nice, professional, but affordable microphones. And in this work, there is no shortage of high fives, back slaps, attaboys, but sometimes it is challenging to find people who really put their money where their mouth is. And we appreciate Third Street doing just that, and we cannot recommend their team and services enough. So check them out, and big thanks to their team for supporting us financially. Now, without further ado, on this episode, we have Michael Ham, who is the co-founder and president at Wild Orchard. Wild Orchard is the world's first regenerative organic certified tea brand and boasts 27 SKUs of tea products. In this episode, we learn about the incredibly unique growing conditions for Wild Orchard's teas on the Jeju Island of South Korea. Michael gives us a deep dive education on the wild differences between Wild Orchard's products and the conventional tea industry. Plus, we talk about opportunities to bring regenerative brands to market through leading tastemaker channels like MICHELIN Star restaurants and other high-end food service operations. Michael is just one of those energizing people that leaves you feeling better after every single conversation. This one was super insightful and entertaining. We hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Already lots of laughs circulating today because we have our good friend Michael from Wild Orchard joining us. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
For sure. I remember, I don't know how long ago we first connected. It was a while back, but I remember getting off that call like, Michael is a good dude and he is whip smart was like the main thing I remember coming away with.
You're too kind.
I appreciate that. But no, I mean, you're fun to talk to. You got a wealth of information on the regen side, on air quality, like just a wealth of knowledge. So we're looking forward to diving in with you there.
Great.
Now, I was actually contemplating this yesterday as I was thinking about this podcast episode. I ask this same question on every podcast, and it's like I feel like I need to ask it in a different way because I'm tired of saying the same line. So I still haven't figured out what the new way is going to be, but for people who have yet to see Wild Orchard, who don't know about your brand and your products, this is really hard.
Consistency is not a bad thing, brother.
Yeah.
All right, well, then just give us the lay of the land. Tell us, like, what SKUs do you produce? What flavors? Where can people find your stuff?
Sure. So just to give a 30,000-foot overview, we are a regenerative tea brand, meaning that we focus on the soil health, the microbiome of the soil. We believe by doing that, it'll produce the best tea, and it'll actually maximize the potential of the terroir. So maximizing what that land can produce in terms of quality of tea, flavor-wise, environmentally, many, many different aspects. So we launched 3 years ago here in the US, although our partner farm is located in South Korea. It's on the southern tip. There's an island called Jeju. It's like the Hawaii of South Korea. We actually have 1,000-acre tea farm there. It's the largest in the history of Korea. And so we're extremely proud to be associated with it. We just came to market last year. We've been selling like D2C, Amazon, but last year, pivotal moment was when the world-renowned Noma, the 3-star Michelin, voted 5 times the best restaurant in the world. They selected our teas at their New York City pop-up. So that really like energized us. Until then, we were kind of like, how do we get out there? How do we build our brand? But then from there, we started to get into more Michelin restaurants, higher end cafes. Now we're in more hotels and restaurants throughout the country. And, but we also have the mindset to democratize high quality teas, like bring high quality teas to the masses. And so we just launched our tea bag line at Expo West. And we just got recently into Jimbo's. They're always forward thinking out there in San Diego, right?
Let's go.
Mom's Mom's Organic on the East Coast,
Yeah.
another one. They just put a PO to put us in all of their stores.
Wow.
And we're talking to some of the larger ones right now to try to get into some of their stores. So it's an exciting time for us. We have 27 SKUs. It's a mix of loose leaf
Wow.
traditional teas,
Yeah.
botanical blends. Yeah, I can't even believe we have 27. I was just looking it up today, preparing for this. Right? So loose leaf. We have both traditional, which is your green, black, oolong, and then the botanical blends, which do really well as iced teas in restaurants and hotels, and then the tea bag line, and then for our cafes, our black matcha, which is very unique. It's matcha from the black tea leaf. That's really, really popular because it's very difficult to find a good one out in the market. So that comprises of 27 SKUs, and it's hard to come up with SKUs, right? But we pretty much have been developing those over the last 3-4 years of our existence. And the goal behind that is really to create a breadth of variety so that anybody can find a tea that they can enjoy.
Heck yeah.
Let's go. Lots of stuff to chat about today. I mean, we're kicking off with tea terroir, which I can't wait to dive into that. And want to give you a shout out, Michael, for being the first regenerative organic certified tea company. I think that was a big accomplishment, and just kudos to you and the team for that. Yep, absolutely. But take us back, man. You have a really interesting and I think compelling personal background. How did you get into the tea business? Yeah. And you work on some other similar things in the health and wellness space as well.
Right. No, thank you. I majored in kinesiology like you. I'm a huge sports guy. I mean, the first time we talked, we were talking football, we're talking sports, right? And there's a lot of parallel in sports to life, especially going through challenges and making sure you have a diverse team. A team full of superstars is not going to win you a championship, right? You got to have a good mix. And I think agriculture is very similar. You have to have that biodiversity. It's not just about soil. It's about like livestock. It's about integrating insects and bees and creating that ecology that allows nature to do what it's supposed to do, what it's designed to do, right? And when that happens, then magic happens. And I've heard a lot of the guests you had on your podcast. I think we have that similar vein that goes across. Let nature do its thing. Let's stay out of it as much as we can. And so my history, because I have I majored in kinesiology, I minored in human nutrition, even though it's been a while since my college days, I remember distinctly when I chose my major, I was like, I want to do something that can help elevate the human condition. Like whoever I come across, I can be of use, I can be of value, I can help them. And then from that, it's really about connecting with people, right? So little did I know back then that I'd be here talking about tea, because I was never really a tea fan. Playing sports,
Really?
We'd go to the 7-Eleven after, we'd have the big gulps and the Slurpees, you know it, Anthony.
Wow.
That's what I remember.
When you're young and you feel invincible,
right?
You treat yourself a little differently,
Right. So, but ever since I got through college and I understood better how important what comes into the body, obviously being more mindful of it, and I would drink tea once in a while. I knew it was great. Actually, the partner that we've had, I've been drinking their tea for 20 plus years, but I never really took a great interest in it. I was just like, this is a good tea. I know it's the highest quality, but it was only like 4 years ago when our founder, my colleague, we've been working together for about 20 years. He was like, let's talk to the farm. I mean, we know they have world-class teas. They're not really, they don't have any vision to expand outside of Korea or plan. Why don't we take this and introduce it to the world? So it was like really quick movement. Within a couple of months, we got to talking to them. We're like, we really want to introduce your teas to the world. This is what we can do. We're in the health and wellness space. And they were like, okay. So that's how it started. And and so here we are today. And the two things that we did when we started was we need to validate the product, because in Korea they were winning all the national tea awards, and so we were like, that doesn't really translate to the global market. No one really cares
Yeah.
if you won an
Yeah.
award in your native country, right? So we were like, we got to get onto the world stage. So we started entering all the top tea competitions. There are the four most prestigious in the world. I call it like the Grand Slam because it's from the UK, the US, France, and Australia. And to our delight, we actually won the best green tea in three of those, and second in the fourth one. So that's when we got even more like energized. We were like, okay, now we're in the game. We have validation. And then the next thing was, okay, how do we create not only the best tasting teas according to the tea experts, but how do we infuse it with the message of sustainability that we know the farm has been focusing on for, since their inception. And so that's when a good friend of ours, Max Goldberg, he was like, have you heard of ROC? I was like, what's that? And then he said, you should apply. And then, so we looked into it. We looked at all the stringent regulations, and we talked to the farmer. We said, do you think we can do this? And they were like, this is stuff we've done since the very beginning, right?
Wow.
So we decided to do it, and then we got certified last year. So it was extremely gratifying.
That's huge. And there's a lot that I want to unpack there. Number one, I like the parallel. You keep talking about these competitions with tea, and we're talking about sports. And it really feels like you love to compete. So this is like an opportunity to compete on the world stage in this way. Obviously, tea terroir is a little bit different than playing actual sports. But a competition is a competition, right? And you've got that competitive nature. But I'm curious to kind of dive in a little bit deeper on the farm. You said they've been doing this stuff for 20 years. Why 20 years ago did they decide to start growing tea this way? Where did they get their education? And, it sounds like the segue into ROC was really, really simple because they already had that, foundation of knowledge.
That leads right into the origin story, and it's something that we are the most proud of, or that I'm most proud of to be associated with, because the farm actually had originally they had a farm in the traditional tea growing region of Korea called Boseong, and that's the typical slope mountain where you see the rows of tea bushes. Looks very well manicured, and they started that about 35 years ago, right? And so from that farm, they started winning all the medals domestically. So when we look at Jeju Island, there was a barren piece of land. It was just filled with, it was untouched, but it was filled with weeds and grasses. And actually, our founder's father had the vision. He was like, take the seed from Boseong, let's prepare the land, and let's create the largest, highest quality tea farm in the world. And so before that could happen, they had to get a lot of volunteers, remove all the rocks, prepare the land to plant the seeds. And the reason why the Jeju Island is so ideal for tea, it's copious rainfall. So you don't need separate irrigation, right? So with climate change, we know one of the biggest challenges for farmers is just drought conditions. You're not getting enough water, right? And so there's no problem like this on Jeju Island. It's just copious amounts of rainfall that are irrigating the land. And then it's a volcanic soil. There's a Hala mountain. It's a volcano. Hopefully it doesn't erupt during our lifetime. But I mean, we've experienced the wildfires and everything recently out east. But anyways, the volcanic soil is very permeable, so it allows for that drainage. And then when you implement regenerative practices, you're actually creating a rich microbial or microbiome within the ground. So the way that, like when we show pictures of our tea farm, it's not so well manicured, like it, because we let it grow wild. We let wild animals come in, and so it may not look so kept.
What kind of wildlife is on the island? I'm trying to paint the picture. I also, how big is the farm relative to the island itself? Is it like?
Oh, the island is much bigger.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. I wish. It's, even though it's 1,000 acres, it's a very, it's a blip on the map because the island is pretty big, right?
Gotcha.
But animals, everything from birds, bees, like it's just so rich with wildlife. A lot of deer come in. We had geese on the property. So the interesting thing is when you plant the tea by seed, it was already amidst weeds and grasses. So it's a constant battle. And the reason why that was done is so that if the tea, just like competition, right? If it can overcome the grass, if it can overcome the weeds, then it will be much stronger in the long term, right? And we all go through that playing sports, that process. So the geese played an awesome role, and the reason why we have it in our logo here, we have the geese here, is because when the tea seeds were just sprouting and very young, the geese would go in and eat everything but the tea because they don't like the tea. They never ate the tea.
Wow.
They would only eat
So
we
it's
call
like a little
them
bit too bitter for them.
Yeah, exactly. So we call them the
like
natural
caffeine.
born. Yeah, that could be part of it, but it's more of the catechins that they don't like. So
well, I mean,
we call
honestly, there's nothing scarier to me than living in Bend, Oregon, where we have aggressive Canadian geese. Like a caffeinated goose is like a horror story waiting to happen. You know, like that could be like a really grippy and like horror film. Yeah.
we need to bring some over to the farm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But we call them the natural born weed killers, right? Yeah. So they really help the teas grow to the point where now it took 6 to 10 years before the tea could then thrive. So it was a very patient process. It's not normal because in this type of operation, it's like the accountant's looking at the books. Okay, you have 1 year to do this and produce product.
Right.
But they took it as a long-term project to create something special.
Yeah, I mean, 6 to 10 years alone, is that just the growth cycle, or does that include the preparation of the land? Because it really feels like this, like you said, this is a decade plus in preparation before even having a product to sell, which is, to your point, in the typical economic model, like no brand has that kind of runway.
Yeah. No, it took 6 to 10 years before you could actually harvest high quality tea.
And that level of diversity, Michael, does that affect how the tea is harvested? Does it have to be harvested by hand? Is there like no mechanical intervention because of it?
Yeah, so the other thing, the extent to the way that the farmers go, they don't even allow any gas powered stuff to get on the farm. They don't want any of the pollutants or toxins to touch the tea leaf, and so we have a future roadmap of implementing battery powered machinery that can harvest late spring tea, which is a larger part of the tea tree. So just to give a brief overview of how tea is harvested for people who aren't familiar. So when there's a tea tree, the very first shoot in the spring in April, that's the most precious tea. It's called the first flush. That all has to be picked by hand because you can't just cut it like that exact with a machine. You have to pluck it.
For people who are listening, Michael is making hand gestures that are very small. They're quite small, like we're talking, a centimeter in size. So power tools on that size of a leaf, plucking these things out, not really going to work.
So that's the most precious first flush. The taste is the smoothest, has the most antioxidants, different balance, but that's typically considered like the premium tea. And then you have a week or two later, you start plucking the leaves below it. So that's like second flush or mid-spring. And then as you move into like May, June, then you go later spring. And then those ones you can actually harvest and then have more mass production. So all of the ones that win the awards are really the hand-picked ones. And then the later harvested ones are the ones that we will use. They're still the highest quality. It's just a different part of the tea tree. And we will utilize that for our tea bag line and for our iced tea line, things that will be more mass production.
Makes sense.
I want to continue with the how does this happen or how does this work behind the scenes of like, okay, processing. That was a great illustration that we haven't dove into on the podcast of like how tea's harvested and grown. And I don't know how does tea end up like as loose leaf tea or bag tea? Like what happens after it's harvested?
Right. Okay, so a lot of people don't know that black tea, green tea, oolong tea are all from the same tree. The
I
only
did not
difference
know
is,
that. Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So the only difference is, so I'll take you through the harvest. So let's say April, we hand pluck and we harvest it.
Mhm.
When we process it right away and stop the oxidation, that's green tea. So
Mm.
that's the soonest from harvest. Processing is green tea because there's no time to oxidize it.
Mhm.
When you half oxidize it, that's oolong tea. And then you have a much different taste to it, right? It's
Wow.
Hold on.
more
How do you
flowery.
control the oxidation process? Is that simply
Heat.
time, or is there some other step
Yeah,
involved?
heat,
Heat.
heat,
Okay.
heat.
Mhm.
So you spread it out in the sun. That stops the process. But then you also bring it in. There's heating drums that will also stop that oxidation
Wow.
process. But there's so many different processes, right? And each of them have to be dealt with at a artisan level to produce a world class tea. So
Mm.
Hmm.
for example, black tea is fully oxidized. So green is the least amount of oxidation, very little, if any.
Mhm.
Then half is oolong, and then full is black. And then in between there is white tea and yellow tea. So you have the whole gamut. And
I was just gonna ask.
every,
So, what about
yeah.
how do those ones work? What
Yeah.
I need to know. How do all these
It's
teas
all
come from the same plant?
it's all about where you stop the oxidation. That's what it
Okay.
is. So
Mm.
where you stop it will determine if it's green, white, yellow, black, pu'er, and oolong. Yeah.
And is that the order?
So the great,
Green, white, yellow,
yeah.
oolong, black? Like that's like the
No,
oxidation order?
white is first. White, yellow, green,
Okay.
Yeah, the
oolong,
darker.
black,
Yeah.
pu'er.
Right.
Yeah. Six
I'm
major subtypes.
I'm picturing Michael with like a secure briefcase, like putting away the samples that are for the Grand Slam shows, like in a silver briefcase, and like getting them ready for the judges.
Well, you know what the funny thing is, we didn't even know to optimize the tea. So the first competition we submitted, I just took it off the shelf and told one of my team members send it
Wow.
in.
Wow.
And then later on, our farmer's like, "Why did you do that? We could have sent you our like most cared for ones."
Yeah.
So after that, we would ask the farm, "Okay, send us the competition grade ones."
Mhm. What,
Crazy.
Michael, what's it like as a CPG operator to manage a supply chain that far away? I mean, it sounds like production, processing is all happening on the
Yeah,
island, and then you're just getting a finished product. But like, I'm assuming just
yeah.
like hours of operation, communication, like just talk us through that experience.
Sure. So the hurt is starting now because before our volumes were not very big. Now we have to
Mhm.
we sent out like 40 cases the other day, and now we're like, oh shoot, we got to do this properly because we don't want to be out of stock, but at the same time,
Mhm.
we don't want to store too much. So we're really
Mhm.
doubling down on software now, right now.
Mhm.
And our VP who handles the supply, she's actually at the farm in Korea
Nice.
now to work out all these things. But it's a lot more advantageous because we have it's direct source to farm, single
Right.
origin.
Right.
The tea industry is the traditional supply chain is the tea farm sells it to someone in the country at auction, and then it goes at auction. Then there's the exporter, then there's the importer, then there's the broker, then there's the wholesaler. So there's so many
Wow.
middlemen, and the farmer loses out. And it's like
That's
that in other
crazy.
industries, right? So
Mhm.
what we want to do is show by example. If you direct source it, and there's a lot of great regen brands that are going direct, right? They're
Yeah.
benefiting the farmer. That's one way that we can scale regen, because when the farmers are actually feeling the benefit, they are
Mhm.
more incentivized, but it actually gives them a future, a sense of hope and a future that they can do this long term. So that's
Mhm.
really what we're really happy that we have that access.
Mhm.
Yeah. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about, you mentioned sort of the comparison between direct source and commodity tea.
Yeah.
From a growing perspective and a practices perspective, walk us through the
Yeah.
differences between how most tea is grown in the world and how the tea grown in, I'm not going to pronounce the name of the island right. Help
Yeah.
me on this.
Jeju.
Jeju.
Jeju. On how the tea that
Yeah.
you all grow on Jeju, how
Yeah.
that's different and why that impacts the flavor and the nutritional
Yeah.
profile of the products differently.
That's a great question. And it's something that everyone should know,
Mhm.
because when people go to the shelf and they pick a tea, there's no one that can say, oh, I buy this because it's from this farm in this country and I know how it's grown and I know the nutrient levels are going to be at the highest possible because of the way that it's grown. No one can say that. So typically a consumer will go to the shelf and look at the package, and whatever appeals, whether it's the colors, the design, or certain keywords, or this helps you sleep, this helps you get energy, those things. So the message that I want to kind of share with everybody is the majority of teas grown, whether it's in India, China are the two largest tea growing regions, the majority of them are not grown organically. So the first thing is, if it's not grown organically and you have pesticides and fertilizers, the tea plant especially is very efficient at absorbing what's in the soil. So then you have to be mindful of, when I consume that tea, what's actually coming into my body. So that's why there was a very concerted decision or effort to plant it by seed, because when you plant it by seed, the roots are deeper, you have a better absorption of nutrients and water, and you're producing a stronger and healthier tree, which is going to pay dividends over the long term, right? Not many farms are
What would the
thinking about that.
alternative be? Would it be like planted via cutting, like an existing plant that you just like move?
Cutting.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's the other option. And most people do it that way. So you're not getting as much nutrient absorption. And the other area I wanted to tackle your question is, because the typical supply chain has so many middle people, there's a lot of pressure on the farmer to lower the price. And then they're kind of like trapped by that commodity model and they can't escape out of it. And as you guys know, we're trying to show the value of regenerative to conventional farmers, saying if you engage in this, your farm will be more resilient. You'll be able to mitigate against climate change and these one-off events, or chronic events, so to speak. And then you're going to get a better return. And we have to collectively create that market for that return and that value to the consumers, because unless we provide that value proposition to the consumers, we can't really gain market share.
Right. So what?
Three.
Go ahead.
Three
AC,
things
go ahead.
there. Yeah. So one, if people really want to support organic agriculture, Michael mentioned Max Goldberg. Definitely check out his platform, Organic Insider. It's awesome work, and just thanks to Max for his kind of trailblazing leadership there. Abby Ann at Cat Spring Yopon talked about this whole kind of pesticide chemical issues in the tea industry too, because not only is it being grown that way, but when you steep the product, when you heat it up with hot water, you're basically making that more bioactive and more bioavailable to then be received into your body. So just wanted to add that onto kind of the chemical issue. And the third thing was, all that of what we just said, I want to add to what you're saying there, Michael, about kind of direct sourcing and breaking down some of these barriers that are created by too many parts in the middle. Is like, what do we need to make that commercially viable? What do you need at the end? You need a brand. And that's the whole point of what we're talking about here. And the whole point of like why all this works is like that last cog in the wheel that makes the whole thing spin is a brand.
Totally. We have to get away from chemical cocktails that so many people are exposed to, because we're in this business to elevate people's experience and health, right? So if that's why the farm is, we have so much trust in the farm, because they've set that precedent. Like, there's a radish grave in the middle, like right by the farm, of 3,000 radishes. And the reason why this is so prominent is because they were, everyone knows kimchi is a popular Korean dish, right? And it's because of the fermentation aspect of it, it's really growing globally. But soon after this farm was set up in the late 90s, they were actually, another part of the farm that's not tea, they were harvesting the radishes and they were ready to make kimchi like en masse. And they were washing it 3 times, making it clean, like making sure that it was the cleanest, purest, healthiest for people to consume. And then later on, the organizer, the person who was leading that, found out that some of the people seasoning the radish put in saccharin. And then all hell broke loose, right? And the precedent was set. It's a sweetener, but that's a carcinogen. It's like not good for you. It's like it's like an artificial like I don't know the chemical makeup of it, but it's like akin to an artificial sweetener.
Yeah.
And
So they were putting the
the
saccharin
latest
in the
use,
kimchi itself, not in any part of the growing
right,
process, but in like the finished
right.
goods.
After.
Yeah.
So
Right,
it's like
right.
it's one of the best kimchi products you can find anywhere. But then
Oh
this
my
was added
gosh.
to it to taint it. So
Mm.
the person who was running all of that or overseeing it was like, you know, this is not good. I would not give this to I would not give someone something to eat that I would not eat myself. So unfortunately, I don't like wasting, but we're going to make a grave. And there's a big grave on the farm site. That's a
Mm.
constant reminder that we should only produce teas that we would want to consume ourselves and want our children to consume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's really cool, and I really respect the decision to do that. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And this is to Anthony's point, the power of the brand. When you're that close to how the food is produced, that level of integrity can go through the entire process into the end product. And when it's an aggregated commodity, tea, radish, whatever, like you lose out on that identity. So I think it's really great
Right.
that the brands like Wild Orchard are doing this direct trade model, and we desperately need it, and it makes telling the Regen story all the better. I do kind of want to zoom out a little bit because you do have a really interesting background. So, what were you doing prior to Wild Orchard? What sort of health and wellness space were you existing in at that time?
So two things prior to tea that I was doing was I was involved with nature photography and nature art, and we would do exhibitions around the world in Europe, and hundreds of thousands of people visited. And
Wow.
that's really where my development or understanding of biophilic design really started to take shape. I could see the way that people would look at photographs of nature, and these are like world-class printing, world-class exhibition venues, and they would look at it like if you go to the Louvre, even like when I was there looking at the Mona Lisa, people are just there, take a picture, but they wouldn't stay there for like 5 minutes just looking and admiring the brushstrokes and all the elements of how it was crafted
Mm-hmm.
by this famous
Mm-hmm.
historical artist, right? It's more like a photo opportunity, right? But when we were doing the exhibitions, people would just stay in front of the photos for minutes. I would see people crying, and I would ask them,
Wow.
"Oh,
Yeah.
what made you like get so emotional?" They would say, "This image brought me back to my youth, and I'm just reminiscing about my youth that is long ago, but it just seemed like yesterday when I'm looking at these photos." So I really got appreciation for art and the ability that it has on wellness. And there were actually people who were running hospitals, like, and they were like, "Can we purchase these and hang in our hospitals because we think it would do
Wow.
great for their mental health and stuff?" Because people are when they're in hospitals, they're in a very dire mental state,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah,
and
and talking
then
about like the most artificial environment ever created, like the hospital.
right.
So having that like
Oh,
nature pull
totally.
there, yeah, would be so
Yeah,
beneficial.
totally. So I spent a few years doing that, which I really enjoyed. But then my colleague kind of took over that department, and I, you know, being really my philosophy on health is we all have a system that we have to understand holistically, and
Yep.
the core of that system is really what I've learned talking to so many mentors and medical practitioners and scientists is that it's really the blood that is the key to our health. If our blood is healthy, clean, filled with nutrients, it's going to supply all of our cells throughout our body. It's going to protect our brain, balance our immune system so we can ward off things like COVID. But the blood is the key. So, what makes clean blood and healthy blood? It's the food that we eat, right? So, the nutrient density of the food, it's all going to impact the health of the blood, which will in turn, because it's going throughout our body, feeding every cell in our body, that's going to create a strong foundation for our health. But then the other aspect of it is, what are we breathing in? What are we drinking? Water and air. That also has to be clean. Otherwise, it's going to affect our blood. So that's why I got into creating healthy environments, because 20, the average weight of what we eat per day is about 2 pounds. Anthony, I think you're a bit higher than that.
I was going to say, speak for yourself.
For sure.
You got to fill out that big body, right?
That's right.
So water, the average amount of water we consume a day is about 4 pounds, but the amount of air that we consume is almost 30 pounds.
Wow.
So the quality
Blowing
of
my
the
mind.
air that we breathe in is going to have a tremendous impact on our long-term health. So the reason why I'm so passionate about air, water, and tea is because the tea is going to bring in a lot of nutrients, antioxidants to repair any of the environmental damage that's going on in our cells, the free radicals and the oxidation, and then preventing the bad stuff from being breathed in through our air, and the water we drink is actually going to compound into a healthier state, short and long term. So that's really where my focus is.
Yeah, that super hits home for me because of the issues I've had with mold toxicity and how that's really spurred some of the autoimmune issues that I've had. And, it's so important. And, that's what I also love about Regen Ag is we can reduce overall environmental toxicity by, this work that we're doing. And, I'm like picturing us doing podcast 2 on the island. So whenever Netflix and Amazon wants to pay us to do a streaming show, we're going to the island and we're going live. But Michael, that kind of spurred a question in my head of, you have a really interesting background to talk about how you would market this product then to consumers based on all this wellness experience you have. So what's that been like? It's obviously still early days on the retail front, but what's that experience been like?
So for tea, it's been challenging because, as I said before, I was not like a tea lover from the beginning. We're all learning as we go. CPG is very new to me because the other businesses are totally different business models. We go B2B. And so we rely on partners that do all of the outreach and selling and marketing. But for tea, you have to kind of like have a very buttoned up story. We're still working in it. Like even the stuff that I'm talking to you about, it's not refined. Like if I go in an elevator, it's tough for me just to do a 1 minute and just wow somebody because I'm having a tough time narrowing everything and synthesizing it into like an elevator pitch. So we need to work on that a bit more. But
I think it's pretty solid if you want my 2 cents as of what you're laying down, brother. So just wanted to give you that.
Thank you.
Agreed. As somebody who doesn't consume caffeine, like every time I hear you talk about tea, I'm like, I really want to drink this tea, and I don't even drink tea. So yeah,
but Kyle, I remember at the event at Expo West, I was going to say,
I know what you're going to say, and I feel so bad about this. I still feel bad about this. So please tell the story.
I'm just going to say that the caffeine in coffee is different than the caffeine in tea. Not the caffeine molecule, but I'm sure you know all this. But just to educate the audience, right, if they don't know, the tea has something called L-theanine. So when it mixes with the caffeine, it gives a very slow release. So unless you're like the 1 to 3% that are just super sensitive for caffeine, and Kyle, you may be, but super sensitive to caffeine, the caffeine in tea, for the most part, I know a lot of sensitive people to caffeine. And then when I introduce our teas and I say, just try a cup a day or try a sip a day and see how it is. I've never met anyone that's like, okay, I can't have it because it just got me too racy, right? So I'm not gonna put any pressure on you, Kyle, but I'm just saying that because the L-theanine, the amino acid, mixes with the caffeine, you get a slow release over a long period of time. So you don't get that spike like you do with coffee. And then it also adds calm focus. So you get energy, but calm focus to it as well. So you have multiple synergistic kind of things happening with tea that I think a lot of people like, because we've been doing this 3 years. I've talked to a lot of people, farmers markets, I can't have caffeine. Just try this. Are you ultra sensitive? Just try this. And then they end up being customers. So it's pretty cool.
I appreciate all that insight. My caffeine, I gave up caffeine in high school. And
I see.
For me, it's actually more of a, I don't want to be reliant on a substance to feel the way I want to feel model.
Right.
And that combined with just the lack of consumption I had, like if I eat a really good piece of like 80% dark chocolate too late in the evening, I have a hard time sleeping. So I
I
think
see.
I
Bro,
could be a
that's
little bit of both.
wild. That is
Yeah,
wild.
if it's like
I was at
if it's like
I was at
after 8
Expo West
o'clock-
having like 7 of these shots. I was like, Michael, serve me up another matcha, brother.
Well, and that takes us back to the story. We're in a ROC conference room at Expo West, and Michael very graciously comes up to both Anthony and I with it was the black matcha, correct?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Black matcha, with Alexander
Dairy.
Dairy, which I consume on a daily basis. Love that these are two regenerative brands working together, like everything I stand for and believe in. And Michael, the founder, makes it for me, and I'm like, oh, sorry, dude, I don't drink caffeine. I felt like such a jerk. I felt so bad.
You know, Kyle, what
So-
I'm going to do for you? I'm going to create a herbal tea just for you. No
There we
caffeine.
go. There we go.
I will buy. I mean, you'll get plenty of ROI. I'll buy it all the time. So if you make that happen, I will purchase it.
Awesome.
I don't know where I was going. There's some other question that popped up at some point, and now I completely lost it. AC, what's on your mind?
Yeah, we derailed Michael talking about marketing the product, and I want to add a question to that question as he finishes it, which is around, Michael, have y'all done studies around the nutrient density, or are you preparing to put any data together, whether it be like retailer or consumer facing? So like just back to that marketing topic.
Sure. So regenerative, by definition, with the soil health, immediately the topic of nutrient density comes into play, and there's a little more trust. But we eventually have plans to lab test all of our teas for caffeine content, nutrient density, antioxidant, EG, CG, all the stuff, because that's the ultimate transparency, right? There's so many claims that can be made, and having regenerative certification actually there's a built-in trust that because you do it the right way, of course, there's going to be higher nutrient density. But like anything, we want to be able to show how much. And probably in the next year or so, we'll kind of go through that process of lab testing everything for those major markers that people are interested in. And that's another marketing point.
Totally. That brought me back to the question I had in mind. And this is something that, as a brand looking to scale, it feels like you've got a finite farm. You direct trade, you source all of your tea from this 1,000 acres. What can you do? Like, do you already know what your ceiling is? Like, we can move this amount of product per year. And if so, from a growth strategy perspective, is it like, okay, we can get into this many doors at this velocity? Like, what does that equation look like? Because it kind of feels like a zero-sum game.
Yeah. So we know that it's very hard to find another partner like our current one in other countries. Like, we've talked a lot internally. So South Korea, Jeju has there's the word terroir again, very unique terroir geographically. So the teas, if we maximize the potential of it through regenerative agriculture principles and applying them, then we're maximizing the tea for that region. Let's start scoping out a tea region in Darjeeling where we can apply the same level of standard to that, and then have a different type of tea, which is more black tea centric. So Asia, Japan, China, Korea they have the tea variety called Camellia sinensis. That's more associated with green tea. And then in Sri Lanka and India, it's the Camellia sinensis assamica, and that's where most of the black teas in the world come from. So you're going to get a totally different dynamic of taste. But we also are interested in creating the highest quality from that variety as well. And so getting to your question, it's 1,000 acres in Jeju. We are using less than 10% of it right now. We think we can handle all of the North American market, retail with tea bags, hotels, restaurants, food service, all the places that are fit for us and we want to get into. We think if we maximize the 1,000 acres, we can handle the North American market. But then that's why we're talking about going into other regions and applying what we're doing in Jeju to those new regions now ahead of the game. And we are talking to people in India. Can you help scope out a region that is ideal for us to enter maybe 3-4 years in the future?
I mean, that's the number one shocking to me, that 1,000 acres can produce enough tea to handle the North American market. That's incredible and awesome to hear. And it gives you that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, the reason why is in a typical tea operation, it can't, because harvest season is typically from April to maybe May or June. But we have a plan to harvest all year round. all year round. So even when it's snowing, we would be harvesting because
brutal.
because the seasons will also result in a different taste of the tea. So we want to be able to say this one was harvested in December, and someone will be like, my favorite out of all year months is December. So they will like wait for December, or they will drink tea all year long, but they will look forward to December the most because they like that the most.
Just when I think that tea can't get any more complicated, now you're bringing seasonality into the equation. So there's like the 3 different tiers of when you can pick the tea. There's like the 7 different oxidation periods, and now there's 4 different seasons. So I can't do that math in my head right now, but there's a lot of possible tea varieties coming from that 1,000 acre plot, which is mind-blowing.
Exactly.
But what I also really love about what you shared is and we've heard this from a few other regenerative brands that we talked to, and it's this sort of proof of concept model. Start at a small farm, prove out that regenerative works, that you can tell the story there, that you're making the benefits, you're improving the nutritional density of the product, etc., and then take that and apply it to new pieces of land to scale, not just the community that you can serve, the tea drinking community that is benefiting from your product, but also the impact you're making on more acreage around the planet. So really, really looking forward to seeing like how those projects develop over the next few years.
Michael, is the plant, this is a dumb question, is tea perennial or is it annual? Like I'm picturing you mentioned this long timeline to basically develop the farm. I'm picturing y'all harvest this by hand. Like, is that a yearly thing and then you replant it? Is it like, what's the answer?
No, it's a perennial. It's a perennial. It's not a stupid question. It's very important, and it's another reason why regenerative works so well with tea, because you don't have to till. You don't have to do much. You're always protecting the soil. Actually, the way that we add more to the microbiome of the soil is all the tea leaves. We don't do separate compost. It's a good thing and a bad thing because we're not utilizing the full aspect of the farm. So a lot of the tea leaves are just falling on the ground. And then that's actually contributing to the microbiome of the soil. Yeah. It's like feeding itself, right? So it's a bad thing because we could have so many people benefit from it if we could package it and deliver it, but we'll get there over time. But yeah, it is a perennial, and it's, I think, one of the best crops to apply regenerative to. And we want to like shout that message to the tea growing world. It's the second largest consumed drink after water in the world, right? So there's a huge impact that can be had with tea converting to regenerative.
Totally. And I'm curious, go ahead.
What's the life expectancy of a tea plant? Like, is this 10-year plant, 20-year plant? Like,
decades. Yeah. I don't know the exact, actually. I'll find out for you exactly, but I believe from the plants that we've planted in the late 90s, they are the ones that we are harvesting from right now. So it's already been 25 years, right? So, and our tea, the reason why we called it wild orchard, because if typically people say tea farm or tea estate or tea garden, some people say tea plantation, but we're getting away from that because of the connotation. But we say tea orchard because we let it grow wild, and some of these tea trees are 10 feet tall, and you don't see that normally. So people need ladders to go up and pluck it. So it's very unique.
That was going to be one of my other questions. You mentioned the potential of 4 harvests in a single year. Is that coming from different parts of the 1,000 acres? So is it like broken up into 250 acre grids, and you would harvest from one, or do you have the ability to actually harvest the whole thing 4 times? Like, how fast does this plant grow?
So we plan to have it split up into 2 sections. One for the early first flush ones for the more the tea enthusiast who knows how to appreciate it, because one of the things
folks.
is like,
you can say it. It's okay.
So so the market is so used to consuming commodity teas. I often find it kind of fascinating but frustrating at the same time. So when I serve them our teas, they don't know how good it is because they're used to a certain amount, right? So we want to
Mm-hmm.
change that. And the only way to change that is to say, oh, our teas are in this Michelin restaurant or this restaurant or that. If you don't do that, people are not going to be able to discern that just on their own, right? And then when they
Mm-hmm.
see that, they'll be like, oh, I guess this is what good tea tastes like. Okay, I'll try it a bit more. And they develop that taste, right? But at least 4 harvests throughout the year, because once you pluck it, it's going to keep growing.
Right.
Once you harvest it, it's going to keep growing. But the first flush, the early shoot is really after the winter, that prime early flush. So that's mid-April.
Gotcha. It's funny you mentioned like the tea palate of most consumers. And I couldn't help but immediately to think back to chocolate. You know, people who eat Hershey's bars and think that that is chocolate, you know, quote chocolate, you know, then they try like a really good high quality single origin dark chocolate bar that's like maybe 70, 75%. Like, whoa, like this is way too much for me. Yeah, that palate isn't developed. So I didn't realize you have the same type of problem with tea. But I would imagine it's probably a tough hurdle to have to overcome.
It is, but one way that I think we are able to overcome it now is, so 4 out of every 5 cups of tea consumed in the US is iced tea. And as we know, the typical iced tea is the black tea, bunch of sugar, right? The typical Lipton tea that we see in the refrigerators. So, you know, the world is getting hotter. People are cold drinks are getting more popular because the weather is getting hotter. But what we see in the market is sodas, caffeine, anything with sugars, they're diuretics. They're going to start to dehydrate you. So even though it may be refreshing for that split second with the fizz and all that, you're going to start to get more dehydrated and you're going to have to look for more. And then it's not healthy. And the younger generation is more attuned to, okay, I don't want to put bad stuff in my body more, right? So what we're doing with our cold brew teas, when you cold brew over like 6 hours or overnight in the fridge or on your counter, you brew it in ambient temperatures or in the fridge, the bitterness is reduced tremendously. And our teas are not that bitter to start with. So, and then when we add a bit of maple syrup in it, our cold brew teas are just like garnering a lot of attention from hotels, spas, poolside, restaurants in California. And they're drinking it. It's tasty. They know it's healthy. It's at the highest quality. And it's quenching the thirst, right? So I think this area there's a huge room for growth for us. I think that's where we can really make a footprint. And then it evolves into, okay, this green tea is so quenching, tastes good, and then it's just going to spread from there.
Well, knowing you, the quality of the water for your iced tea has got to be off the charts. It's going to be a whole nother level. But I'm curious, why do you choose maple syrup as the sweetener?
It can be honey. That's my personal preference. I like maple syrup. It tastes the best for me. But other people would be honey. You know, things that are maybe a little better on the glycemic index. Honey is good. Yeah.
And how much are you putting in? Like, what's the sugar per serving on these iced teas?
So very little. I don't know the gram, but we put very little because the tea itself, because they're blended teas, they already have notes of fruits and other things. You don't need a lot of sweetener in it. It's just that very little amount just to optimize that taste for people's palates. There's just so much on this side in terms of sweetness.
So like sub 5 grams per serving for sure.
Oh, yeah. Much, I would say much even lower than that, I would say. Yeah.
I'm from like an RTD space. I'm like, okay, so this is like Spindrift or less, like slightly sweetened just to get like enough, but you know, very, very low, inconsequential amounts.
Yeah. Right.
Got it.
The commercialization strategy you keep touching on, Michael, around kind of going to the curators of terroir, if I could ever learn how to say that word, which is the food service industry, right? Especially like your high-end food service operators. And then kind of backing that into retail distribution and using that as, you know, you're having this influential group kind of spur maybe some demand or some velocity there. Just like talk us through how you came to that and like more on that, because I feel like if you're an avid listener to the show, you've gotten probably a good education on, hey, you want to get into Whole Foods or KeHE, you go to the category manager, you go to the buyer, and like this is how you get on shelf, and this is how you increase velocity. But I don't think we've done as much of a deep dive into that food service side. So would love to just have you educate the audience on that high level strategy, and then more execution on like who are you calling, how are you getting in front of these people, like what are their decision making criteria, etc.
Right. So food service, it's the main reason why we're exhibiting at the Fancy Food Show, because we definitely want to go heavier into food service. The margins are typically better. But interesting for the audience. So we get a lot of cold emails, cold calls, and there was a distributor of biodynamic and regenerative wines in Colorado who I'm going to meet in 2 weeks. Maybe we can meet together, Anthony.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. So he reached out because he said, with food, there are some wines that do not pair well with food. It's just a fact, and chefs know it. But tea is way more versatile. So when we go to a tea pairing, you can fill in those gaps. So his mindset was, I heard you're the first regenerative tea brand, like traditional Camellia sinensis tea. And he said, I'm very bullish on tea pairings in restaurants. And he was interested in working together. So we just sent him samples. We gave him the story. And he was like, hey, I'd like to work with you. So be in Denver, end of June. Let's meet up and do a strategy planning session. So he's already servicing the top restaurants and bars and places in Colorado. Now the goal is to get our teas into that distribution there. And by doing that, because we talked to Dot, we talked to all the big food service distributors, and they're like, if you don't already have some inroads, don't think that we're going to open an account for you. And it's similar to natural and organic too, right? So, at before Fancy Food, I'm like doing my reach outs right now, and I reached out to another top food service distributor that was just bought by KeHE, and we're on KeHE. So there's actually a talking point there right now, right? So we're like, we're in KeHE, Mom's just picked us up, Jimbo's picked us up. Once you guys are going to have I know the transaction just took place, but once you're integrated with KeHE, we'd love to get the ball rolling. We're in these restaurants, this Michelin restaurant. Can you come to our booth, have a meeting? We'll get you some taste of our teas. And there's this trend, because we're talking about tea pairings. We're talking about tea infused into alcoholic drinks, non-alcoholic drinks. And, I wasn't expecting much, but the head of sales was like, okay, I'm going to come to your booth, right? So that's how we start this. And it's very beginning for us. But if we can show traction and then get an account into DPI, have him introduce us to their top retailers that are who he thinks is a good fit for us, then we go and do tastings. And that's the hustle part of it, right? Going there and do the tastings. But we found that whenever we do the tastings, share the story, it's a very high conversion rate.
I believe it. And just to expand on that a little bit, how does that story translate? Because food service in restaurants it's a whole different beast. Yeah. How did the restaurants tell that story to their, you can't even call them shoppers, their eaters, the people who come into the restaurants
patrons.
And purchase food. Patrons.
So,
I should know that term, and I don't.
So we give 2-star Michelin in New York City, that's our partner. They ask for the product description so they can put it on their menu. So obviously it's just an overview, but what they were telling me is what they're seeing amongst their customers. And these are people that are paying $500 plus a meal, right? And they are coming in and they're not ordering alcohol like they used to. They're not ordering wine like they used to. They're seeing a downward trend in alcohol. They need something to fill that revenue up, right? And so they want actually a premium tea that they can charge a much higher. So that's where the appeal for a product like ours comes in, because they can say, okay, here's a cup of tea that's going to be $15. That's going to be $20, right?
Yeah.
So,
and not only is it the price though, but it also fills that storytelling aspect that you can have with the tea. Talking about the origin and the way it's grown and all these other things. I don't know if tea has the same level of varietals as wine, but it still, if it feels more than just the price niche, but like that desire to feel connected to place and that you're experiencing something unique, right? So I can definitely see why that works well as a good substitute.
Right, totally. The tea pairing one is something I'm very interested in because there's a huge room for growth. And there's another trend, there's wine and cheese pairings, right? So
Mm,
now there's a trend tea and cheese pairings because tea is so versatile. It can really accommodate all different types on the spectrum, strong to mild cheeses, right? And so
Yeah.
I've also been talking to one of the top cheese distributors. Hey, let's kind of pioneer the
yeah,
cheese pairing movement, right?
yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, I can't even get my sales team to like learn more about a new cheese. So right now is not the good time,
Mm.
but I like your idea.
Yeah.
Let's work on it. So it's all foundation building right now for these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Totally. So, I mean, we sort of just talked about the future and a few different like channel perspectives and opportunities, which all sound really exciting. But let's bring it back to retail, CPG, North America. Um,
Yeah.
so, for the future of Wild Orchard, you guys are utilizing 10% of the total
Yeah.
property right now, right? So
Yeah.
this feels like there's a lot of room to grow. We talked about the North American
Yeah.
market.
Yeah.
What does the future look like for Wild Orchard, the brand, specifically at
Yeah.
like grocery in North America? Is
Yeah.
it, focusing on distribution wins? If so, is that, about growing different demographics or different channel strategy? Is there different
Yeah.
product innovation down the pike? Like we talked a little bit about iced tea. Is there an
Yeah.
RTD in the future? Walk us through that.
Yeah. Okay, so for retail, every young brand wants to have distribution, hopefully, especially regenerative and organic
Mm,
brands. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, we are looking for that. But over the last couple of years and looking at all the different channels, and I have to say, I have some great mentors that I've been introduced to, and I talk to them regularly. But one of my mentors, Rightful Hughes, he said that every channel is like a child, right? So the more
yeah.
children you have, the
Yeah.
resources, the energy you have to spend, and we're still a small team of five.
Mm,
So when he said that, it really kind of I really thought we needed to refine our strategy. So
mhm.
for our retail distribution, we are tackling the first phase. That first phase is getting into retail with retailers that are the best fit for us. So
Yeah.
Jimbo's, they're pioneering regenerative in the retail space, right?
Yep.
They're
Mm-hmm.
pioneers of organic. Moms as well. They're like way up there in terms of fit.
Mhm.
Whole Foods would be a great fit for us. Wegmans is a great fit for us. So I'm just trying to limit it to like a handful, maybe 10, where we can go in and do
Smart.
demos and really help educate and work with them, and even work with like other regen brands to talk to those retailers to build in
Mm-hmm.
more educational opportunities at store level in front of the consumers. That's the foundation building that regen really needs right now. So instead of just like, okay, you're interested in going nationwide, okay, like instead of really focusing efforts there, for retail, we really want to focus on fit and then getting a stronger message out there to their customer base,
Mm,
right? And then when we start to see traction and velocity, then we can go into phase two and really go to other like national retailers and scale it out that way.
mm,
And we also need time to do that scale, to model it out, that scalability, because we're not really fully equipped right now at the farm. We're at 10%. Yeah, we
mm.
could probably scale it to 20% without major problems. But when it starts like booming into 30 and 40,
Yeah.
we need to have another facility. We need to have more machinery. It has to be battery powered, nothing that's going to pollute the environment. So there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of work to do that we need to get there. And then with our hotels and restaurants, the iced tea part, which I really believe is going to result in huge growth for us. Eventually, like right now, it's cold chain refrigerated because it's the healthiest, it's the most refreshing, and we can deliver it. And hotels are okay with a week or 14-day shelf life. But we see that evolving as that business grows into the RTD drink that we want to design. And
Mm,
RTD, we want to do it in a way that maximizes, doesn't, pasteurization kills a lot of the nutrients, and then you have
mhm,
to put in all this like preservatives to keep it for a long shelf life. We still have to
Mm-hmm.
work on doing it in a way that like matches our ideals for the
mm,
type of product we want to deliver to the customer.
So are you looking at
mm.
like UV light pasteurization or some other process other than like HPP or some of the more
Yeah,
conventionally
I,
used?
I got to give a shout out to our friends at Soul Tea, Ryan. Like they
Yeah.
do it really the right way. They do reverse osmosis, like so clean water, and then they put it in glass, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I talk to him a lot, and yeah, we have to come up with something that meets the standard in all of the other areas that we set, right? So
Right, because you don't want to put saccharin in your kimchi, you know?
That's right. That's right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Michael, this has been super fun, man. Super informative conversation. I'm going to take us home with our final question that we ask everybody that I'm sure you're prepared for, which is, how do we get Regen Brands to have 50% market share by 2050?
So we need to support people like you more, right? We need to give you more love and spread the news. Like we need to like your posts and spread it across and get people more engaged.
I didn't pay Michael to
with the
say that,
content.
everyone. I just want to say that on the record. That was not planned. And thank
No,
you.
but no, I think everyone does already appreciate you guys, but this is not your full-time job, right? This does not earn you your living. So what you guys do is a tremendous support. We need to support, advocates like you, but it also has to extend to brands like us. We have to do our own education within our audience. And then the brands need to come together like the coalition, right? We need to have collaborative efforts, but then we need to bring in retailers and then policymakers like the Farm Bill, like people that are going to Washington and creating incentives for farmers to transition from conventional to regen. Everyone has a role to play in this holistic. I look at it as a body. Like you guys are the mouthpiece right now, right? We are like the hands and feet, right? Who's the brain? The brain is nature.
TBD.
The brain
there
is
you go.
nature.
Yeah.
The brain is all of us.
Nature. Yeah. We let nature speak for us, right? And then we need policy making. All of this has to work in tandem if we have any shot at getting to 50%, right? And some of the industries that we can look at to model is maybe the clean energy movement, because so many incentives are being made, and people like brands like Tesla, they pretty much accelerated that movement to clean energy. And why can't we do it for clean food, clean agriculture, right? So there are many models in place that we can try to model after, but really it's just about resilience, like being just pounding the pavement every day, providing value to consumers. There's no one answer. The answer is in all of us.
I super appreciate that feedback. Got to give Anthony credit. He does 95% of the work for this podcast, the newsletter and everything behind the scenes. I get to show up here, talk to people and leave. So AC deserves all the credit in the world for that. I also think, your model of the EV, I talk about it on a regular basis. It really feels like we are in the early adopter phase of regenerative agriculture, where if you think about Tesla way early on selling over $100,000 for a Roadster with, I think it was like 120 miles of range. People bought it. I think they only made 2,000, 2,500 of those cars. And that was step one. And it really feels like we're in that step one phase. We need that proof of concept. It's going to be premium. But then as we get more adoption, more education, more people to understand that this is important, and we give them viable options to support, we can scale, prices can come down, and we can capture more market share. Tesla's now the most valuable car company in the world, and there's an opportunity for Regen, and not necessarily be, the bigger, more profitable companies than big CPG, but to have that type of an impact. So I think it's a really good analogy and a really good movement to kind of like follow in their footsteps and learn from what they've done, because it seems to have worked so far.
Great. Yeah, totally.
Michael, you're a legend, brother. This is so fun. This is one of my favorites.
Thank you. No, it's really a pleasure to talk to you guys. Even better to meet up. So looking forward to the next time we can meet up in person. Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll drink. If you come up with the right non-caffeinated beverage for me, I will drink it and not be a jerk.
On my call today with my team, I'm gonna put that on the agenda.
We appreciate you, Michael, man. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks a lot, guys. Be well.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen recaps on the website. Regen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.